Hi everyone, Cliff Bumel here again. I'm going to file this under the fun but very interesting and probably pretty important information kind of videos. Where I'm standing today is in the orchard of a small orchard owner, 15-20 acres in the Sacramento Valley. Of course, he has another job, so does his wife, old piece of family ground. Most of this old ranch is really excellent walnut ground, grew some great Hartleys for many years, but it's over now. So they're quickly going down, and as you probably all know, at that scale, you just can't pull the whole thing out and start over. So he replants as he goes. And in this kind of soil, you can actually make a pretty nice orchard because 80% of this orchard is the best walnut ground and water you ever saw, and the back 20% is the worst walnut ground you ever saw, and it's actually the first place we trialed Grizzly starting about 8-9 years ago, and so he has a lot of experience with it at a small scale, but has seen the results. Anyways, what I want to show you today is as these Hartleys die and become very sick, he takes out 10 or 20 a year, maybe 30. Firewood in the fall, right after harvest, get it backhoed out when there's a dry spell, backfill, try to get some compaction, and replant the next spring. No spot fumigation, and away you go. So what I'm going to show you, I'm going to walk it, which it occurred to me that there's going to be two types of people. It's going to be those of you who love this walk around sort of stuff, and the ones who hate it. And I watch a fair amount of YouTube videos to get information on things, and it can be frustrating because you really want to know what the guy's talking about, but at the same time, it's really hard to pick up on what he's actually trying to show you. So I apologize, but again, these are just things to wet the whistle and to give you some information and give you a visual. Lots of information on the website, grizzlywalnut.com. And I'm available, all the licensed nurseries, anything I touch on. This is a starting point, not a finishing point. So anyways, what are we looking at here in the next couple minutes? So this grower has also tremendous deer pressure, like a lot of you are getting these days. And also, he has seen that by planting a tree directly from the nursery, a bare root nursery, in this case Sierra Gold, who has the most history with Grizzly clonal walnut rootstock, upon request, we'll leave the trees 9 feet tall out of the nursery row so that you can establish your scaffold the first year. This sounds crazy, right? Well, an orchard was planted, a good 7 or 8 years ago now, with all trees 9 feet or taller, and associated with Sierra Gold in their production walnut orchards, and that walnut orchard produced 3,000 pounds in the third leaf and has produced excellently, and that is actually published data in conjunction with many of the UC Cooperative Extension Advisors in the International Society of Horticultural Sciences. So what was proven pretty convincingly several years ago was that walnut trees don't need to be planted short and make a trunk the first year. Just like we do with almond trees and fruit trees, is to establish a scaffold the first year and get into production earlier, which I think a lot of people are interested in, given that return on investment and time value of money. Doing less pruning and getting nuts sooner could be a real value in this depressed price. Here, he's also got the horrible deer pressure, as I mentioned, so it's a win-win. But, I mean, do the trees always grow great? Well, it's hard to say. But let's just give you a little example of what we're talking about. Vigor helps in this kind of program. You're going to plant a 9-foot tall bare root walnut tree. Vigor really, really helps. And so the grower's a big believer in Grizzly because of what he's seen, what he's experienced. So what I'm going to show you is the trees planted about April 15th after something like this was cut down last fall and backhoed last winter. So that tree right there, and all the ones I'm going to show you. Let me just pan quickly, say over there is the last year's planting and the year before and stuff like that. And because Grizzly is still difficult to propagate, those are actually VX211 trees. They look fine. This is great dirt. But now he was able to get Grizzly. And so that's a tree planted this April. Fairly tall, and you can see he's established scaffold. And I should say that because of the drought in this particular water district, This grower has only been able to irrigate 12 hours every 2 weeks. And with these sprinklers, he's putting out about 1.5 inches of water. But for a bare root tree, just planted, tanked in, these trees could be significantly bigger if he could, feed them, spoon feed them a little bit more. They probably had 2 shots of dry fertilizer, likely calcium nitrate, something like that. That's pretty popular in this area. So I'm just going to walk down here. So there's a tree. It's put on a few scaffolds, but also from our experience, we know that tree will, the shorties will take off. He'll have a nice central leader tree. Again, the orange band on the tree means Grizzly rootstock. He's got a nice tree there. Again, so we'll keep walking across here. Another nice tree. Again, only been in the ground since April 15th. You need stress tolerance, and you need adaptability is kind of the technical word. So that tree's off and running, and you can see how the white paint put on the day of planting is kind of, the tree has added girth. Well, there's kind of what it looked like. That's the tip, and then as I come down, I know it's a little tough with these. It's really added girth. Oh, and no stakes, no sucker rod, because the tree starts out slow. It actually even sets nuts like any Chandler, and from those buds that are in the trunk. So I think this is interesting for a wider and wider group of growers to know about, this unheaded bare root tree, and being able to get in production earlier, whether you're just worried about the deer or not needing to use a stake and the tying and everything else. I mean, here we are, he's kind of sandwiched in here. And here's this tree, and yes, it's sunk because it's hard to backhoe out a tree and get everything to settle all in the same year. He'll fill that in. I mean, that tree looks really great. It's still putting on growth, although it needs to stop now. Oh, you can really see. Yeah, you start out too low here. So you're into all kinds of deer cages and stuff. But it turns out, again, win-win. No deer cage, but in 2 years, he'll be shaking nuts off this tree. And he doesn't have to have stakes. Oh, this one hasn't done so good, but he's really close here. And that tree next year will just explode from all these trees, or the limbs rather, grew out and set a nut and kind of stopped. My experience in this soil with this grower, that'll really go next year. You didn't lose anything, because when you grow a conventional tree, what do you have at the end of the first year? You have a trunk, and then you do laterals. Well, this tree already had, or scaffolds. This tree has a scaffold, and it doesn't need to be staked. I think we already looked at that one. Those trees, I'm not going to talk about those, because as I said, those are 2 years old, 3 years old, and you see the stakes because they were conventionally grown. Needs to cut a sucker there. Here's the last one we'll look at. Really nice looking tree. Leans a little bit, but that tree will grow into a nice shape. So the nurseries all grow these 12, 15, 18 foot tall trees, cut it off to 5.5 feet. You cut it off to 3 feet. And I will say that the research in the last 10 years says that we're wasting a bunch of tree based on 50-year-old ideas. That really we can start the structure of the tree the first year. We can get in to harvesting earlier. We can do it without a stake, whether as a replant. I mean, if we can do it here in a replant situation with a guy that has a full-time job and can only water once every 2 weeks, think what you can do in an optimized situation. So I think this is some of the most important and interesting stuff going on in the walnut world, given that we need to maximize every acre and every penny going forward. And I hope you found this interesting. If you want to talk more about it, always can contact me. Look at grizzlywalnut.com. Contact one of the licensed nursery. In this case, Sierra Gold grew these trees and knows a lot about it. Has an orchard like this. So anyways, I hope it wasn't too shaky and too all over the place, and hopefully gave you some information. Thanks.